Well, good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Jeff Caruso. I'm the director of the Virginia Catholic Conference, which represents the state's Catholic bishops in their two dioceses in public policy matters. We are very pleased to be sponsoring this event, along with Catholic Climate Covenant, the Diocese of Richmond's Office of Social Ministries, and Sacred Heart Catholic Church. We're certainly grateful to the parish for its hospitality and for the key role that Neil Walsh. Neil, please stand. He's already standing in the back.
Hey, Neil.
And Amy and Jim and Kent.
For Neil, for the key role that they've played in helping with so many aspects of this event. I can't even begin to count the ways that they've helped us here. I hope you were able to pick up copies of the program and the speaker bios on your way in. They were at the sign-up table. If not, copies may still be available at the back of the table. And then in terms of the substance of the event tonight, you could say that it was really Pope Francis who brought us here. In June, he released an encyclical on the environment called Laudato Si, on the care of our common home. And today, we are here to make real connections between the message of the encyclical and some critical local challenges. In other words, we're here to engage each of you in a conversation about the encyclical's vital relevance to this region. As we get started, it's an honor for me to introduce Monsignor Walter Barrett. Monsignor Barrett is the Episcopal Vicar of the Eastern Vicariate for the Catholic Diocese of Richmond. His bio, of course, is available in the printed materials. Monsignor Barrett will be providing an opening prayer, some words of welcome, and will then introduce Bishop DiLorenzo, who we're honored to have with us this evening. After Bishop DiLorenzo's remarks, I will then introduce our additional distinguished panelists. So at this point, without further delay, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Monsignor Walter Barrett.
Let us pray. O God of the universe, we ask for your presence. We ask that the discussion tonight will lead us to a deeper appreciation for the beauty of all creation and for the importance of being better stewards of the time, talent, and treasures you have given to us. These things we ask in your holy name. Amen. Amen. Yesterday, August the 24th, Wall Street and a whole lot of us will not forget because of what happened to the stock market. August the 24th, 1820 had a big impact on us. As a diocese, that was when Father Patrick Kelly was named the first Bishop of Richmond in Dublin. Bishop Francis DiLorenzo is not from Dublin, at least I don't think. He's from Philadelphia. He came to us by way of Honolulu and was installed the 12th Bishop of Richmond, May the 24th, 2004. Bishop DiLorenzo has served as a member of the Administrative Committee of the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops and also a chair of the Committee on Science and Human Values. In an earlier time as chairman of that committee, he inaugurated a series of popular teaching brochures reflecting the bishop's consultation with top scientists on topics such as the relationship of science and religion and ethical issues in the rapidly growing field of genetic study and genetic screening. It is my pleasure to introduce the man who assigned me to this part of the diocese, which is known for hay fever, hurricanes, humidity, and heat.
I want to thank Walter for that lovely introduction. I want to thank all of you this evening for coming. It is a topic that is of interest. It is a topic that is important for all of us because it touches all of us, regardless of whether you're rich or poor, whether you're in one ideological class or another. Climate and the environment touch all of us. I think it's important to get some things straightened out right from the beginning in our conversation. the relationship between science and religion. Religion usually comes in light of faith, something that is not empirical, something that cannot be measured. Science, on the other hand, deals with what can be weighed, felt, tasted, measured. The methodology of faith is much different than the methodology of science. And so the question is, how can we as persons of faith have some intelligent interaction with the findings of science? That's the issue. And what we're saying is, even though there's been a lot of bad press for a long, long time between religion and science, as a Catholic Church, we don't see ourselves in conflict with science. We believe that as persons of faith, science helps us to understand the realities around us. We certainly may talk about issues associated with religious meaning to what scientists find, but we're not fighting with one another. We're not in tension, we're not in stress. So when we talk about this issue of the environment, the first issue is we have to understand, what does science say about the current state of the situation? And religionists need to stay out of that discussion because our methodology is slightly different. We're waiting, in a sense, to get some preliminary information, data from scientists, because we have something to offer in the dialogue, in the discussion. But right now, it's important for us to kind of zero in on what the science is saying and pay attention to that. In this current encyclical that the Pope wrote, my sense is, when you actually look at what is the goal of having written that, we are not trying to pronounce and say, we're scientists. We are religionists. We are persons of faith. We try to take the latest findings in science, and we try as best as we possibly can to see how is that fitting in with, and what is our responsibility? What is our response to what science is finding? What responsibility do I have concerning the data that science is offering out to me? They're telling me this is good, this is bad, this is serious. Well, then, persons of faith have to take that serious, what's being said, and then they have to respond. I have to respond, and it's an ethical or religious moral response to what they're saying. If they're saying to me, for example, this is getting out of hand here or there, I have to make a response out of faith and my moral background. Now, the goal of the encyclical specifically, the goal of the encyclical is the Pope wants to initiate a dialogue with the whole world concerning the business of the environment and what's happening. Some of the serious problems touch everybody in the world. So he's not out there beating us on the head, telling us you got to do this, you got to do that. He's saying, let's start a dialogue, because this is our common home. So we need to have a worldwide dialogue. What is the goal of the dialogue? He is seeking a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. So we're looking to talk with people throughout the world, persons of goodwill who are reading what the scientists have to tell us, who are genuinely concerned and realize that the implications of what they're saying touch all of us. And if we have some responsibility, and that's science is expected to tell us that, to what degree are we causing the problem as humanity, then that calls forth from us a religious moral response to do something about that so that we don't ruin God's good earth. It's our responsibility, therefore, to protect God's handiwork. And this is an essential aspect of our lives as persons of faith. We talk a lot about this issue, but also, too, why should we, as persons, why should we engage with everybody in terms of this dialogue? Because inevitably, this has met already resistance. Persons who say, there's no dialogue, or shouldn't be no dialogue with those people. They're a bunch of Bible thumpers or something like that. We're just looking for real science, that's all. As if persons who are not believers, they're not where we are, like somehow or other we can't have a dialogue. We can have a dialogue because there are a lot of people who are not believers but are persons of goodwill. We are in this soup together any way you cut it. So whether we're a believer or not a believer, we still need to enter into a dialogue with one another as to what is our responsibility. I may be called forth because of my faith to do such and such and thus and so. But this person, who is a humanist, a secular humanist, he too, she too, has to have some kind of a sensible response to this world and the environmental situation that is presenting itself through the eyes and the research of the scientists. And so that's what we need to do. We need to enter into a dialogue with all persons of goodwill, even if they're non-believers. And there are some people who are very angry at religionists, and, fine. Not much we can do about that. But we need to enter into this type of dialogue. We do not completely dominate the world. Our theological perspective is this. Persons of faith, we don't dominate this world. That is not where we are. We believe that God brought into existence creation. And so God is the creator and ultimately the one who is written into this world design, and it's really God who has put into this world the laws that are slowly discovered over the centuries by science. Religionists, on the other hand, seem to be very much awed by creation. It is an awe-inspiring situation. So, those who do not believe that God created the world, man is God for all intents and purposes. It is he who dominates and is control of all the universe. That is a separate and different perspective from where we are. So we've got to get that straight in our dialogue also. Because if it's man who is the ultimate measure for right and wrong, and that there is no accountability to a creator, that can create some real problems. And it has created problems, obviously. And once somebody says, I'm on the top of the mountain, I'm on the top of the heap, I can do whatever I want. And accountability is in no way owed to any higher power, God, or anything else. It's whatever I want it to be. So, we have our work cut out. We are challenged as persons to dialogue with all persons of goodwill as Christians. We try as best as we can to hear what scientists are telling us, and then we try to work together with all persons of goodwill to respond in a meaningful way that will abate some of the problems that maybe we have created.
We are certainly blessed to have the bishop with us this evening and are so grateful for his insights. And it is now my privilege at this point to present to you an outstanding lineup of speakers who each take that big picture and zoom in on particular aspects of it. Again, bios of these speakers are available in the printed materials. And after providing a very brief overview of the lineup for the rest of our symposium, I will then turn the microphone over to them. Also want to encourage our speakers, if you would prefer to come up to the podium, it's whatever your preference and your style is, sitting at the table as a panelist or up at the podium, either way. Our next speaker in the lineup will be Dr. William Dingus, who has been a faculty member at Catholic University since 1984, whose extensive research interests include religion and ecology, and he will elaborate on the theology of Pope Francis' encyclical. After Dr. Dingus's remarks, Captain Ray Toll, who is the Director of Coastal Resilience Research at Old Dominion University, will describe how climate change and rising tides are affecting the Hampton Roads region. Then we have Commander Andy Presby, parishioner here at Sacred Heart, and he will describe the direct impact the area's flooding has had on the home where he and his wife Joelle live. Andy is here as a member of the Norfolk community, and his comments are his own. They should not be taken to represent the views of the United States Navy or any other piece of the government. He asked me to say that.
They know. Put in a good word for us.
Next, Admiral David Titley, a nationally known expert in the fields of climate, the Arctic, and national security, will explain the effect of climate change on the U.S. Navy and national security. And then Dan Misla, the founding executive director of Catholic Climate Covenant, will tell us how the U.S. Catholic Church is embracing Pope Francis' encyclical and federal environmental advocacy efforts. One additional note, on your chairs when you came in were note cards. And what we would invite you to do with those note cards, if you wish, if you have a question for any of the panelists that you're thinking of as they're making their remarks, we'd ask that you please jot it down. And we have two collectors of the note cards here this evening. The first is Lonnie Ellis of Catholic Climate Covenant. And then we also have Virginia Catholic Conference Associate Director Michael Lewis. So they will be going around and collecting your questions. We may not have time to ask all of them, but we are going to sift through your questions and do our best, so be thinking of those. And so with that overview, let's continue this timely conversation, starting with Dr. Dingus.
So I just want to begin by saying thanks to all of you for coming out on this, what I think is a very important occasion. And on a sort of a personal note, it brings great joy to my heart and affirms my own sense that this is an issue, the sensibility of care for creation, concern for the environment, what this means for us as a community of faith, that this is something in kind of a physics metaphor that is beginning to reach critical mass. That's so important. And this is a motif that's repeated in this encyclical. I'm going to be fairly concise here. I want to make 5 points, and they're derivative of my sense of, if you're addressing an issue or someone wants to do research, the 2 most important questions one might ask: who cares? And so what? What's important about this? Why is this encyclical so significant? So I want to give you my own sense of, here are 5 reasons why we are at a really important moment with regard to Pope Francis's thought. The first one is that this encyclical is a document concerned with the environment, concerned with care for creation, And what it does is to bring church reflection on this issue to a new level of magisterial importance and legitimacy by virtue of the fact that it is of an encyclical nature. It shows that concern for the environment, particularly in relationship to this idea of integral ecology, that this is not something that's peripheral or incidental to Catholic religious self-understanding. This is, if you will, integral to who we are as people of faith. And it isn't that reflection on creation, on the human relationship to the natural world, is something entirely new. I mean, Roman Catholicism has a 2,000-year, very rich tradition in the patristic fathers, in various theologians, mystics, not to mention the St. Bonaventures and St. Francis's in the church, of giving reflection to this relationship between the human person, creation, and so forth. And as you may be aware, in more contemporary times, particularly with the papacy of Pope St. John Paul II and Pope Emeritus Cardinal Ratzinger, both of them wrote and spoke quite extensively on issues related to the environment. In that respect, for my own sense of things, John Paul II's document in 1990, the World Peace Day statement, Peace with God the Creator, Peace with all creation, this is an extremely important document. Now, it was not of an encyclical nature, but it articulated in a very concise way many basic themes and motifs, which in turn are taken up by Pope Francis, were expanded on by Pope Benedict, and then were taken up by Pope Francis. And this has to do with using clear and unambiguous language, of recognizing that our relationship to the environment, the ecological crisis that we're facing, that this is of a fundamental moral nature. This is not a purely technical or economic or public policy problem. It has elements and dimensions of all those things, obviously, but at its heart, it is a fundamental moral issue. The themes of the imperative of ecological conversion, the theme of the imperative of working together with other communities of faith, and so forth. These are all themes that were laid out by John Paul II in this Peace with God, Peace with all creation. Which of course then begs the question, if you read Laudato Si, what is it, or in what sense does Pope Francis then advance the thinking within the tradition of theological thought, if you will, in relationship to what has been said already by his immediate predecessors? So I just make this point so that one not imagine that what Francis is doing in this cyclical is pulling white theological rabbits out of a hat and coming up with something that has not been part of religious, moral, theological discourse within the tradition. The second reason this is such an important document is not only in relationship to what it has to say vis-a-vis Catholic theological reflection on the environment, but and that it raises this up, but also it does so with a sense of urgency. That is to say, the bishops at the Second Vatican Council accentuated the importance for those of us, again, as a community of faith, of paying attention to the signs of the times. And if ever there were signs of the times, handwriting on the wall, etc., surely this environmental situation that we are in is part of that. So he makes it clear, Francis does this in my mind in a very clear way. He calls not only those of us that are Catholic, those of us that are Christian, but really all people of goodwill to realize the urgency of what's happening here and why we must act now, or as he uses the phrase, without delay, a number of times in the encyclical. We are living in ways and with economies that, in the scheme of things, are not ultimately sustainable. And in that sense, we are living in ways that are morally, spiritually, and religiously problematic. So there's a sense of urgency in this encyclical. He also emphasizes, and has in other talks that he's given, not only the sense of urgency, but the necessity of courage, the willingness to engage these issues, to act on these issues, and so forth, as opposed to just simply, well, let's have a nice conversation and, then on to the next issue. So there's a sense of urgency to what he's saying here. The third reason I think this is so important is because that it helps, if you will, a document like this within the Roman Catholic tradition. We're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.2 billion people, which is not an insignificant number. This is something that sort of broadens the scope of the interest, particularly in relationship to faith communities at large, for environmental issues. It strikes me that one can make a case that we are living at a time in which there is a kind of religious global megasynthesis that's converging, and Pope Francis uses the term convergence. This comes at a time when we are also facing a global ecological crisis. And this is something that, for me, the environmental issue, it's one of the preeminent ecumenical and interfaith issues of our time. And I'm struck by the fact, by virtue of my own personal experience, and particularly over the last 10, 15 years or so, the tremendous proliferation of various types of interfaith, interreligious, ecumenical organizations that have come together in common cause in relationship to this issue. So you have nationally groups like the Interfaith Power and Light Company, in the area where I live, the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. This is an example of this impetus towards interfaith action on this issue. And again, this is something that's unambiguously encouraged in the encyclical itself. The fourth thing, and in some ways, I think this is really central to what Francis is saying in this cyclical in toto. I mean, this is almost a 200-page document. But what he's doing is accentuating the moral, religious, spiritual dimensions or nature of this crisis. And this is important because, and this has been my own experience, having in a sense been at this for a very long time, I found for many people it's not at all self-evident what religion necessarily has to do with ecology or vice versa, however self-evident that may be to others of us. And what he's trying to do is to alert us to the moral dimensions of these issues, to move us away from a purely technical, pragmatic, utilitarian way of thinking about these problems. That is to say that these are simply economic problems, they're simply scientific problems, they're simply technical problems, they're simply public policy problems. Yes, there are dimensions of all of those to it. But at its heart, it represents a very fundamental kind of moral, religious equation in terms of our relationship with God, with one another, and with our common home. Finally, it reiterates a long-standing Christian norm that care for creation is a Christian virtue. However, we come down on arguments about whether or not climate change is anthropogenic in origins and so forth. It is a Christian virtue to practice care for creation. So this is something that I think is really, really important. And then finally, as my time runs out here, I think he really, in a sense, advances Catholic social teaching. And he does this in two ways, in my mind. One is that he aligns, if you will, Catholic social teachings with what's an emergent scientific consensus. In other words, he brings in, if you will, into the equation of Catholic social teaching something that comes from the scientific community. And this, to me, is an expression of a kind of a a new level of rapprochement, if you will, in relationship to science. The role of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in informing him in his thinking about this was very critical. The other thing is that he promotes this notion of integral ecology, which is to say the relationship between human ecology, natural ecology, that these are one and inseparable. And this was something, again, was a strong leitmotif in Pope Benedict's writings. Francis connects the dots between human ecology, environmental degradation, runaway global economies, and so forth, that this is all intricately related. So, by way of summary, Laudato Si is a big deal because it raises care for creation and the integrity of the created order to a new magisterial level. It raises up the urgency of this issue. Thirdly, it broadens the scope of interfaith ecumenical support. Fourthly, it accentuates the moral dynamic of these issues. And fifthly, it advances Catholic social teachings. And sixthly, thank you for your patience.
Good evening. So I'm going to take this a little bit of a different slant here. I'm the first of three Navy speakers. Two of us are retired. The guy in the red shirt is still on active duty, Commander, United States Navy, Submarine Force. Thank you for your service. Well, I want to point out that the guy over here with the white hair, Admiral Titley, you'll hear from him in a minute. He's kind of the reason why I'm standing up in front of you today. So, I mean, he led as a two-star admiral, was selected by the Chief of Navy Operations to lead Navy's task force climate change, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. Dave and I, Tom Bossy, a few others maybe in the room, came from the naval oceanography community where we were tasked to know something about the science from the top of the atmosphere to the bottom of the ocean, whether we were trying to find submarines, whether we were trying to launch aircraft. We had to know what was happening with the atmosphere and the ocean and that very important interface in between. I remember when I was down the street working for Atlantic Fleet headquarters, and I was presenting my presentations about showing the Atlantic Fleet and where everything was and what was happening with the weather, and the Admiral was asking me, well, why is all that red in the Arctic Ocean? What's happening with that? Why is the water warming up there? And this is almost 911 and a little bit after. I had no clue. And I was blaming it on all the modelers. Now, Admiral Titley was a modeler, so I kept, dissing him about, these guys don't know what they're doing. It's a problem with the boundary conditions and this and that. Turns out there was something there after all, and it took a while for us to figure that out. So what I wanted to share with you, I'm at Old Dominion University. I'm the Director of Coastal Resilience Research at Old Dominion University. I started that position about 14, 15 months ago. I reported ODU maybe 2.5 summers ago now. And it came at a time when, just before the president announced his ocean or climate action plan in December of 2013, and part of that plan called for regional pilots. The idea from the administration was that climate change is a regional challenge. We have to figure out what the communities in the region can do about it. So what kicked into motion the winter of 2014, I should back up and say that my boss is President John Broderick. Many of you know him. He had a vision in 2007, 2008 that started the ball rolling on campus with regards to strategic hires, research, multidisciplinary approach to soft and hard engineering solutions and practices that I just happened to be come in at the right time to bear that fruit, because it's truly a very interesting dynamic with him and his board of visitors and the entire leadership of how the faculty and students are starting to look hard at societal challenges across their various disciplines. So it's exciting for me to be on campus and to see how this train of thought is really starting to matriculate across. So the idea of dialogue that the bishop was talking about is starting to happen, whether you're in the College of Engineering or Social Science, whether you're at William & Mary doing something. It's starting to engender and foster a sense of cooperation and trust that I'm pretty thrilled about. So anyway, my involvement, winter of 2014 now, was the White House was on the receiving end of a Army Corps of Engineers study showing how vulnerable our base down Hampton Boulevard, the largest Navy base in the world with the largest fleet concentration area, was very vulnerable to rising seas, to sea level rise, to coastal flooding, to an aging infrastructure. What are we going to do about it? Well, because of Admiral Titley's leadership, because of those that followed him, they sort of followed me over to ODU, and they asked ODU if we, as a campus, could foster or engender a sense of a community action plan, if we could use President Obama's whole of government model. What is whole of government? It means, again, the bishop's idea of dialogue. It's taking the federal programs, the federal agencies, of which, if you didn't know, in Hampton Roads, there are 16. The Department of Defense is the largest, but there are 15 others that live, work, play, go to church in this region. The region is 17 jurisdictions, 7 major municipalities, of which Norfolk is one of those 7. So it's an interesting dynamic here to try and combine a whole of government approach across all of these different echelons of government. But that's what we started. That's what we were asked to do by the White House and the Pentagon. It started in June of 2014. In the TED Convocation Center, we announced this plan. We told the White House we would try and do this for 2 years. So if you do your math, we are at month 14 of a 24-month effort. We're calling it a pilot. It's an experiment to bring this all together, to align programs so we can address resiliency. What we're trying, coastal resiliency, meaning how do we mitigate and how do we strategically adapt, knowing that from the projections we have from our scientists, if you take a look at your iPhone 5, not 6, but 5, and if you tilt it this way, that's the projection of the amount of sea level rise we're going to get in the next 10 years, 20 years, 10 years, 20 years. So what are we going to do about it? So my message to you all tonight is we've evolved this whole of government model. We have the base commanders involved. We have the city managers. We're inviting them into this decision-making process. We have 5 working groups stood up. One of them are the city attorneys, the state attorney, the lawyers, looking at how the ways we can legally address this together across the Commonwealth, across the federal government, across the local jurisdictions. We have one working group looking at public health. We have one working group looking at our science, one looking at infrastructure and land use. Citizen engagement is the 6th. We do not have any church groups involved with us yet. One of the challenges from Secretary Molly Ward, who works for Governor McAuliffe, and I happen to meet her because I'm also serve on the Governor McAuliffe's Climate Commission, and we're going to roll our final results out next month with 5 or 6 recommendations of what he can do before he leaves office. So what we want to try and convince to him is that this whole government model is okay, but where is the rest of the community? We need more folks like yourselves involved. I applaud what the Pope has done here because it's given us an opportunity to truly engage in this Hampton Roads region of 1.7 million people, that there's got to be a way we can bring that flavor in. And I think you all being here tonight is a testament to see the size of this crowd. We know you're interested, we know you're involved. I think we have a means to involve you more formally. I have handouts, as you checked in, that behind you over here in that far corner, there are handouts of what this ODU program is all about. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, what we're really trying to do is establish a framework of coordination and cooperation, whether you're wearing a uniform, whether you're not, whether you're a federal employee who has a program and you're trying to figure out ways to intersect with a city. Because at the end of the day, water doesn't know, who's who in the zoo kind of thing. It's going to go where it's going to go. So the good news is Hampton Roads is getting a lot of visibility out of this. The White House is telling other parts of the country that there's something special going on here. We have a special challenge, but we're not sitting around doing nothing about it. We are dialoguing. We're following the example of what the Pope's trying to get us to do. So I thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take your questions later. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I know many of you because I'm a parishioner here. My wife Joelle and I have been parishioners at Sacred Heart since 2007. To repeat the obvious, my name is Andy Presby. Yes, I'm a Navy officer. No, that's not why I'm here. Everything I say has absolutely nothing to do with the United States Navy, the federal government, or anybody but my own self. I'm not even speaking for Joelle, who's sorry she couldn't be here tonight. She had another commitment. The reason I am here is, and I have to thank Neil and Amy for for asking me to come. They needed somebody who had experienced climate change at a more personal level, in a more direct and immediate way. And I'm just going to try to take about 4 minutes and give you some idea of what it's like when Sister River, as St. Francis might have said, when Sister Elizabeth comes visiting your home, as has happened to me 3 times before. So my wife and I live on off Hampton Boulevard on Larchmont Crescent, and we live in a little 1-story house, used to be 1 story, on a crawl space. And in 2009, in November, we got surprised because one of the ice storms, I believe it was Irene, left a remnant off the coast, off the eastern coast here, that stayed a lot longer than all of the models predicted it was going to stay, and it pushed a tremendous amount of water up against the coast and caused sea levels to rise. So that might be, oh God, that might be 10 years, but that day, it was like 5 or 6 feet. And so, living about 300 yards away from Sister Elizabeth, she flowed up around my house. And if you're ever wondering, it's not like the movies. It doesn't come in through the doors. My first indication that we had a problem was a wet spot on the carpet. And we've been watching the water level come up, but the models look like she was going to, like the water level was going to go down. But no, it actually starts with a wet spot on your carpet, and then all of a sudden you have water just sort of coming up your floor, and it doesn't really seem to flow in from anywhere, because of course this takes a tidal cycle, so it took about 6 hours for the house to flood. But the house flooded did. It's a 1-story dwelling, so about 8 to 9 inches in the first floor. And it's a drywall house. So what that pretty much means is when they fix it, they have to come in, tear out everything that's not structural up to about 4 feet, because it's not just the Elizabeth River that comes to visit. It's everything we dump in the Elizabeth River, plus everything that was living on the bottom of the Elizabeth River, plus the sewer systems back up. So all that came in, and they basically have to cut out the drywall for about 4 feet above that level. So we were out of the house for 3 to 4 months. It took a long time to fix. And then it happened again in 2011. So in terms of the first thing I'd tell you is nature will sneak up on you. Watch her. She will sneak up on you. Treat her with respect, but keep an eye on her. In other words, be aware of what kind of floodplain you live on. Be aware of the tools that are available to you, not just for coastal flooding and things like that, but all sorts of great tools that the Admiral and the Captain and NOAA provide to us free of charge, except for our taxes. So 2, what was the cost of that like? The cost of that, to me, was on the order of half the cost of my home over those 2 years, and we do have flood insurance. So flood insurance, you guys paid, frankly, a whole heck of a lot more than I did, because the federal flood insurance program is federally funded. So thank you all for paying your taxes, otherwise I would have had to have moved. And then finally, don't feel sorry for me. Don't feel sorry for Joelle or me at all. Why? We are relatively well off, both have good jobs, in possibly by most measures the richest nation in the history of the human race. This is not going to be a problem for us. Yes, everything we're doing is wonderful, and yes, it's going to be a problem for us, and yes, we have to allocate resources towards it. But Doc was talking about different communities of practice on whether or not, ideologies, on whether or not you think this is anthropogenic or not. Doesn't matter. As a Christian, I have a responsibility in our social justice policy to have a preferential option for the poor. And let me tell you, the poor all over the world who live near the ocean are going to have a much harder time dealing with this than Joelle and I did. So thank you.
Okay, you probably noticed there we have a panel of 6, of which 3 of us are academics. So if we actually finish on time, it will be God's miracle, Bishop. So thank you for bringing God into this, because 3 academics, otherwise we just would go all night, I think. Okay, how's everyone doing? Great. Okay, this is a wonderful, wonderful turnout. I am thrilled to see this many people down here. Let's see, how are we doing on the slide? Yes, we have, it's coming up. Life is good. Okay, we'll try to kill the lights a little bit. I'm Dave Titley. I'm actually from Penn State. Any Penn Staters here? All right, okay. Yes, and we were not in the news on the first day of academic term, so that was good. Okay, I am sorry. Okay, Penn State's been in the news plenty, and it's just nice not to be sometimes. I'm going to go through 5 things and try to get done more or less on time. I'm going to go through a little bit of evidence. We're going to go through why do we care about climate change, what are the security impacts, what are the solutions, and a couple closing thoughts. Next slide, please. Okay. When I was first asked by the Chief of Naval Operations, as Captain Toll mentioned, quite a few years ago to go look at this, I kind of dropped back to some earlier Navy experience, and hopefully most of you here in Norfolk, of all places, recognize what that is. It's a sextant, right? Because I actually had to use that on USS First Ship, showing there that we're all shaving with nowadays. But back then, believe it or not, there was no GPS. And half of you would probably know that there was no GPS at one point in the world. So you actually had to do things like, use the stars and all that kind of stuff. And what you learned as a navigator, unless you wanted to work for Walmart really quickly and unexpectedly, was you look at everything, but you don't trust any one thing 100%. But you look at everything. And then you kind of form an opinion where you are, where you're going, all that. So I kind of did the same thing for climate. And next slide, please. If we had more time, we could go through this for a lot of times, but there is just a whole ton of evidence out there. You could look at the rising temperatures across the world. You can look at the really catastrophic loss of Arctic sea ice. That graph on the lower left is actually Norfolk flooding. That is hours per day in the Hague neighborhood. Anyone live in the Hague, or is that, Andy, where you are? I think it's one of those other churches that are down in the Hague. They get from a few hours a year in the 1920s to hundreds of hours a year now flooding. You can look at how the insurance companies count out sort of weather-related events. That's Munich Re on the right side. Tons and tons of evidence. So after you go through all the evidence, the question then becomes, next slide, please. Do you believe? Could I get the next one? It's like, yeah, do I believe in climate change? So, show of hands. I know it's dark in here, but show it so that way your neighbor can't see. Show of hands. Who believes in climate change? Okay. I don't. And let me tell you why. It kind of goes back to what the bishop talked about. This is evidence. I'm convinced by the evidence. But beliefs and faith are kind of things that really are in the bishop's swim lane and not mine so much as a former military officer and scientist. So this really is not, climate change is not a matter of belief. It's a matter of evidence. Now, what we do and how we approach it and the moral implications, your beliefs and your faith absolutely have a tremendous bearing on your response to the issue. But the science is kind of just, here's the evidence. And again, in Q&A, we can go through that evidence if you like. I'm sorry, I know that's a cheap rhetorical trick, but it's kind of like, this isn't really a belief thing. This is okay, here's the evidence, now what do we do? Next slide, please. Okay, so if I could just build that one more time, click it one more time. Yeah, thanks. So really kind of the bottom line is I see climate change, it's about people. It's not polar bears, it's not just an environmental issue. This is a people issue in all its facets. And one of those facets is an intensely moral and ethical component. And I think the Pope addresses that in his recent encyclical. It's about water. If you have to find a unifying principle, I'm not saying this is the only one, but water's a pretty good one. It's really hard to live without water. Water affects everything we do. We just heard some very personal stories about how the change in water, the rise in water, can affect families, rich, poor, or somewhere in between in very fundamental ways. And lastly, it's about change. If you think about it, we have implicitly but literally constructed human civilization on this climate stability. We knew when it was going to be good weather, bad weather, cold, hot, rainy season, dry season, where the water was going to be. And we built a world of about 8 billion people on that, and now it's changing. And the question's going to be, do we adapt as fast as it changes, in which case it'll be bumpy, but we'll get there. If we don't, it rapidly becomes a security issue, because when bad things happen, who does a president call? They call the DOD, you know, and they ask people like Andy, Commander there, and those who have gone before and will come after to go and fix it for them because it's now screwed up, and that's what happens. Next slide. Okay, Nick, could you build it one more time? Okay, so the security parts are, the risks are increasing. You know, Thelma and Louise up there, you know, that first part, yeah, their risks are pretty rapidly increasing, and ours are too. As the magnitudes change in both heat, drought, sea level rise, and then the consequences, and all risk is a probability times what happens, the consequence when something goes by. It's a catalyst for conflict. I'll go through that in Syria here in just a little bit. And really, it's this failure of imagination. It's just really hard to imagine Norfolk, you know, in more than 20 years' time, but probably less than a few generations' time, with another, let's say, 5, 6, 7 feet of water. That's not Ray's iPhone, unless we go back to like my kind of phones back then. But this, what do? It's a fundamentally different world, and it's a different world than human civilization has dealt with. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just a very, very simple chart that I have. It had to be simple because I had to show it to a bunch of 4-star officers. So you guys get that. It had to be really simple. And you can see on the left, you know, here are the impacts. Arctic, bases, disaster relief, security threats, and then capability, capacity, readiness, sort of these military terms, but you know, when you talk about this stuff, they don't want to hear the science, to be honest. They don't care about the science. They care about what's it going to do to them. The check marks are mine. If you don't like them, blame me. If you like them, that's okay too. I'm only going to talk about the Arctic and security threats. I'm not going to talk about the sea level rise. We've kind of talked about that a little bit, and disaster relief, just in the interest of time. I can't do those this evening. Okay, next slide, please. So Arctic, this is a picture I took up in a place called Svalbard a few months ago. Svalbard is this island off of northeast Greenland, believe it or not. It's way, way up there. It's mostly Norwegian, kind of, but the Russians are there too. And all those like domes, it looks like they came out of Star Wars. It's actually a wonderful, wonderful place to control hundreds of polar orbiting satellites, because they see them almost every less than 2 hours, about every 100 minutes or so. It has tremendous strategic value, and it's just kind of emblematic of how the Arctic still has big security implications. At the same time, we're finding shipping routes, resources, fishing, oil, gas. The Russians just made a claim that's like about 5 times the size of California there. It's actually legal because they belong to the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, which we don't. We joined Libya, Iraq, Syria, and Iran, and North Korea in that club of not belonging to that. But I digress. So the Arctic is changing. It's a mixture of what I call constabulary, or sort of Coast Guard functions. But as you watch what Vladimir Putin is doing, there is an increasing hard security edge coming back to the Arctic, whether we like that or not. You know, as the Norwegian defense minister said, we have to deal with the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to go through just an example of a security threat and what I mean by a catalyst for conflict. So you may or may not have seen in the news a few months ago, there was some press about how climate had an impact on ISIS in Syria and the Fertile Crescent. And the story kind of goes like this. So could I just get another show of hands? This is not a trick question. I'm not going to trick you guys again. But who is either in the military or has relations, sort of connections to the military? Okay, so a good number of people, as I would expect in Norfolk. Unfortunately, one of the things we get to do in the military is like accident investigations, and you may have either been personally involved or you've seen them. And almost always, when you read an accident investigation, unfortunately as a senior officer I had to do that a number of times, what you see is things are caused by a chain of events. There's a chain of events. That doesn't mean nobody was accountable or responsible, but there's this chain of events. And climate is increasingly becoming just one of those links. So be very cautious if somebody said climate caused the Arab Spring or climate caused ISIS. It really didn't, but it was part of the chain. So for ISIS, as an example, you got to go back 40 years to the 70s. So you get this guy Assad, you know, basically takes over. He's a dictator of Syria, not a good guy, but he says, we're going to be self-sufficient in food. Okay, roger that. What do? You grow a ton of food. How do you do that? You need water. It's that water thing again. So what does he do? He basically uses way more water with the groundwater than there is. That's replenishing. Well, life is okay, kind of rains all right, things are going good. Gets a few droughts, he survives them. We have the Iraq War, 1 million people come in to the cities. That has nothing to do with climate change. But now you get a really bad drought, and there's a pretty big climate fingerprint, because one of the things that the computers agree on is it's going to get hotter and drier in the Eastern Mediterranean. And unfortunately, that's happening. So now there's no more groundwater because he used it all up. So now the farmers literally have nothing, zero, zilch, nada. So what do? They go to the cities because that's the only thing they can do. What does Assad do? Is he good government? Nah, not exactly, you know. So there's no help. In fact, they're beaten up pretty bad on the guys who have come in. This is on top of the 1 million people that came in a decade ago, the Iraqis. So now you have this completely volatile mix, and boom, it's like a match in gasoline vapors, and off to the races you go, and the whole place is falling apart, and you get ISIS. So does that mean climate change caused ISIS? No. But the fact is that combined with bad management, bad governance, existing grievances, and now you've lost your water because of climate, you get really bad things. And unfortunately, it probably won't be the last case of that. Next slide. That's just one example. Okay, let me just go through some of the solutions and a couple closing thoughts. Next. Okay, there are a bunch of solutions. This is really a risk management problem. Believe it or not, the DoD, the Department of Defense, knows how to do that fairly well. We can do it fancy, we can do it simple. There are technology solutions on the right. The cost of renewable non-carbon-based energy is frankly plummeting. Andy here knows a whole lot about running nuclear reactors, which are also non-carbon, exceptionally safely. The Navy has done that now for well over 50 years and continues to do so. There are technical solutions to try to get better estimates of climate in regions and in the next few years, not just out over 100 years. And I got a slide of actually what Captain Toll is leading down here with many, many other people in Norfolk. This dialogue that the Bishop mentioned, that is so critically important. Next slide, please. So, but what can one person do? So this is just a, build it one more time. Slide I put together there. It was a talk I gave down in a little tiny town in Pennsylvania a year ago. But we all know that to go viral on the internet, what do you need? Cats, right? I don't have any cats, but I do have cute llamas. So LLMA, I won't go through the whole thing tonight, but L, the first L, is learn. That's what you guys and gals are all doing here tonight. You're doing that. The A is advocacy. Why do I put that up? And I just say that doesn't mean you have to support a carbon tax or a this or a cap and trade or anything. The advocacy basically means ask your elected officials at any level, what are you doing to deal with and stabilize the climate? It's an open-ended question, kind of like dating 101, don't ask a yes or no question. It also registers to that politician at any level that this is an issue that his or her bosses, the voters, care about. And if you care about it, they will. It's like if your boss is interested, they're fascinated, right? Okay, at least that's the way it works in the Navy, most of the time. Academia, not so much. But that's what we need, because while what's pretty good with what the Congress has done, what the president has done, without the Congress, this gets really hard, as we've seen. You gotta have the Congress. The Congress will come when the people come. But that's just kind of how our system works. So you really control a lot more of it than you might realize. Next slide, please. Okay, keep going. I'm out of time here. Here's the good news, and this is why I do this with Dan, with the Catholic Climate Covenant and the Bishop. There are so many different groups now starting from their perspective. We're all ending up at the right place at the right time. The faith-based groups, the business groups, the insurance groups, the divestment groups, the health groups, security, environment, science. We're all coming at it from our own perspectives, but we're getting to the same place. Next. Okay, it is the 10-year anniversary of Katrina in a few days. So this is a house when I was running the Navy's meteorology and oceanography that I lived in. And if you click it one more time, if you ever wonder what a 30-foot storm surge coming up your street does, that's what it is. That's me on the right wondering kind of what do we do next. That's what the lot looked like. So when we say we lost our house, we really did. We still to this day have no idea where the darn house went. But it's gone, we know that. And just like Andy said, this is not to make me feel sorry because I did have flood insurance and we were actually in good shape. But think of the hundreds of millions of people around the world who have nothing when that happens and they have no recourse. It's a moral issue. It's an ethics issue. It also becomes a security issue when you have millions of desperate people. Next slide, please. Okay, we talked a little bit about faith. This is what I do have faith in and belief in, is that the U.S. will figure this out. We may be a little late, but we will figure this out. Churchill famously said that Americans can be always counted upon to do the right thing after exhausting every other possibility. We'll get there. And when this country figures it out, we will be, and we are, the leaders of the world, and we'll do that on this issue too. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
I had specifically asked not to have to follow David Tinley. That didn't happen. So I'm Dan Misla, Director of the Catholic Climate Covenant. We are an organization, we're actually an affiliation of 14 national Catholic groups, including the Bishops' Conference and Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Charities USA, and a bunch of others. We work to try to bring Catholic teaching to bear on the issue of climate change, and we do that through our partners as well as some of our own programming. As Bishop Di Lorenzo said to begin the night, if the encyclical was about nothing else, it was about dialogue. And I think that's what we're about here tonight as well. Pope Francis is asking us to look at these very complicated issues and questions about how our earth is being tilled and being kept. And as Cardinal Turkson, the head of the Justice Peace, the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace said, perhaps we're tilling too much and keeping too little. Pope Francis, I think, is asking us to examine our hearts and have an honest self-assessment about 4 key relationships. What's the relationship with ourself, with others, with creation, and with God? And he says all 4 of those are connected. They cannot be separated. How we treat one another is how we will treat the earth and vice versa. So our organization, the Catholic Climate Covenant, is working to assist the Catholic community through our relationships with our national Catholic partners, with dioceses and others, to jumpstart this important dialogue that must begin in earnest, and build a Catholic movement that reacts with enthusiasm and hope to the challenges presented by Laudato Si. So we began our work this year with a very successful launch at the National Press Club, in which Cardinal Wuerl and Archbishop Kurtz, the president of the Bishops' Conference, held at the Press Club in Washington on June 18th, the day it was released. There were about 70 media outlets that covered the event. You may have read about it in your local paper. About 2,200 stories on the encyclical in the first few days. We continue to go around the country and highlight different aspects of climate change and what the church is doing. Bishop Cates and Bishop Amos in Iowa both talked about renewable energy and challenged all the presidential candidates to start talking about this. Archbishop Supich and EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy got together in Chicago and announced that they're benchmarking, they're measuring the energy and the water use in every one of the 2,700 buildings owned by the Archdiocese. In Cincinnati, Ohio, Archbishop Schnurr talked about the wonderful efforts that are taking place in trying to reduce the footprint of the Archdiocese, the carbon footprint, with energy-saving activities. On Monday, I'll be in Sacramento, working with Bishop Stephen Blair and Bishop Jaime Soto of Stockton and Sacramento, respectively, talking to the California legislators about Laudato Si. So that'll be a fun day as well. No, it really will. And then, of course, there's this meeting. We had a press conference this morning, and we had this meeting tonight in Norfolk talking about the national security implications and the very real human impacts of climate change. So we've also started a new program we're calling Care for Creation Teams that you can access on our website. We're encouraging motivated Catholic laity and priests to jump on board with that, to form Care for Creation teams in parishes to do lots of activities around this, around the encyclical. Our annual Feast of St. Francis program is about ready to roll out on September 1st. That will feature a lot really useful dialogue and tools, and it's a nice video with it. That's another great educational opportunity for you. We're developing a 14-week program for small faith communities with Renew International, which is an education program based out of New Jersey, Catholic education program. So lots of great things. In a few short weeks, though, Pope Francis will visit the U.S., and in his address to Congress, Pope Francis will likely encourage action on the environment and climate change, among other topics. How open will members of Congress be is unknown, but we at the Catholic Climate Covenant think you can help them be more open. What we're asking you to do is to visit with your senators in the local offices, so here in Norfolk or wherever their offices are in the southern part of the state here, to talk to them about Laudato Si, to talk to them about what they might do and how they might be receptive to the Pope's message. So we hope that all this groundswell of support for Pope Francis' climate message will provide a sincere welcome as he comes to the U.S. If you want to participate in some of this, see Lonnie over there or myself after the presentations, and we'll be happy to help you with that. Our challenge is to take seriously his words, Catholic teaching on these important issues and basic gospel values, and put them into practice. But let's begin today. Let's begin tonight. Each of us is called to live these values, so pick an issue, whether it's this one or something else. Dive deep into it, discuss it with your friends, and let's go. Let's get into action. The world needs us to step up. As we go forth, however, let's do this with joy. No one likes a grim do-gooder. Let's step up, care for our common home, and for one another, especially the most vulnerable, and do it with joy and with the hope that is part of our faith. Because in the end, God uses our hands, our hearts, and our heads to make this happen, and we need to make a better world for everyone. Thank you very much.
Well, again, I want to thank each of our panelists for their excellent remarks. I also want to thank all of you for being here. We're right on time, so we're going to have 15 minutes for Q&A. I want to thank everybody who submitted questions. And before we get to the questions, there are just a few more people that I really, really want to thank. The first is Diana Sims-Snyder. She is standing right here. She is wearing two hats. She is the Communications Associate Director for the Virginia Catholic Conference. And she is also the Director of Communications for the Diocese of Richmond, and so in those two roles, she's really done an excellent job, both with regard to a lot of the aspects of this evening as well as the press conference we had earlier. Likewise, Associate Director Michael Lewis on our staff also did a lot of work to coordinate this event, as did Associate Director of Catholic Climate Covenant, Lonnie Ellis. Also, Director of Office of Social Ministries in the Diocese, Justin Myers. Where's Justin? Justin, thank you to you and your staff, and especially your colleague sitting in the front row here, Manuel Pereno, who was our faithful timekeeper and did also so many other things as well. So they're all of you and so many others were really made this event possible. Also, I want to, yes, Mr. I would also like to, I understand we have in the audience a reporter from the Catholic Virginia, Jennifer Neville, and I just want to acknowledge Jennifer's presence and thank her for the dedication to being here tonight, and we look forward to your coverage. Thank you so much for being here. Now to our questions. The first one we have is for Ray Toll, Captain Ray Toll. And the question is as follows. Sea level rise is attributed to thermal expansion and the melting of ice sheet. Though those changes might be due to human factors, is it reasonable to assume that these changes would not occur without human actions, knowing that the world or nature is inherently geared toward constant variation?
Wow. I'm not sure my brain's awake enough at this stage of the day. You know, I don't really know what I don't really know. You know, how we started this evening out about faith and science and the data that we have with the science and how we make our predictions. I can only say this, that I'm seeing that things are changing. I'm seeing that the Earth is warming. I'm seeing the ice sheets are melting. I'm seeing our seas are rising. I don't know what's causing it, other than to say that it could be a combination of factors. I know that the Earth goes through different phases. I don't really know the answer, but I've been focusing more on what we can do about it in this region. And what encourages me to no end is the resilience of the citizens that I work with on and off campus, city governments, state governments, federal agencies, to do something about it. I wanted to mention one thing, I think it was you, Dave, about politicians. I wanted to just shout out, if you don't mind, Senator Tim Kaine's name as a guy who has been personally involved with the project I presented to you earlier this evening. He's taken our message to the Democratic caucus. He's had me in front of his colleagues about what he is really putting the Hampton Roads name out there across this United States of America about the resilient citizens that live and work here. So I just think you all ought to give yourselves a pat on the back. He is truly leading on this line of climate change and what are we going to do about it.
Yeah, this is actually an easy question. Yeah, the human component is actually pretty big, and it's getting bigger. There is absolutely what we call in the science world internal variability, natural variability, ups and downs, zigs and zags, and that's always going to be there. But superimposed on that, we now have this trend of coming up. And I tell people this is cutting edge 19th century science. We figured this out with Fourier, Tyndall, Arnhus. So basically by about 1896, science kind of knew why this is. We're trapping more of the heat near the Earth. And that's what's causing the oceans to warm, which is about 90% of the heat. Actually, the heat anomaly goes into the oceans, and it's melting the ice sheets. So year to year, you're going to see some more than others. Decade to decade even, some more than others, because you have things like El Nino and decadal cycles. But you're on an escalator. We're on an escalator. So hoping that the cycle just kind of turns and we go back to where we were is not a good strategy. So we got to kind of get on Captain Toll's bus there and figure out what we're going to do about it. Thanks.
We're not going to get to every question. We're going to do our best to try to get through a few more. We do want to keep our promise of ending right at 8:30, but we do have time for a few more. The next series, there's two questions for Bishop DiLorenzo. Firstly, how can churches get involved in all of this? And then secondly, how does concern for our common home advance the essential mission of the church, that is to say evangelization?
I think first of all, you have in place a lot of very interesting people who have brought about these discussion groups that have taken place in the Hampton Roads area. It's an area that has adult faith formation, not to mention you have a strong component of educating young people in grade school, religious education, high school, and campus ministry. These are all areas that we're present in. So I think it's important that these various venues, the grade school, the high school, and the college, have curricula that make sense, that expose, if you will, the science, the research that's taking place. And then, of course, it is a faith-based situation in terms of the religious aid. We then would bring into focus the theological lens, the religious lens of what is your response now to the findings of science, and especially the impact it's having on all human beings with whom you have shared a bond, because we are brothers and sisters to one another, sharing a common Father. So that would be the first thing. I think you take advantage of the existing groups that generally come together. Grade school, high school, college, campus ministry, as well as adult faith formation, and get a good education with respect to the science involved and the theology, both. And you can do that very easily. The second part is what?
Evangelization. How does the encyclical, how can we use it to further the evangelization mission of the church?
Well, evangelization is basically going out and saying that Jesus Christ came to save us from sin and spiritual death, and that every human being has a dignity. And that dignity isn't vague. They have certain rights by virtue of the fact that they have a human dignity. They have the right to life, food, clothing, shelter, education, health care. That's what we're proclaiming to people. Obviously, the science seems to be suggesting very clearly that we got a problem here, that the right to life is impacted very much. Food, clothing, shelter, education, and health care, all of those things are going to be impacted by an environmental situation that is going south, to say the least, no pun intended. But it's a problem. And again, you have to get the science and do away with all the spin, if at all possible. So, I mean, you know, the more conservative. If this were Fox radio, TV, a Fox network, then of course they think we're all crazy and all the rest. We go to MSNBC and they keep just back and forth and back and forth. So wherever we're going to get our information science-wise, it better be from good scientists. Because then as religionists, we start picking up our news from some of the, you know, places that are very slanted. We're going to get nowhere. So our kids are bright, they're intelligent, they're well educated. They can tell, you know, someone's putting a spin on or not. You got to bring in some decent scientists and then decent theologians. Why? Because we're brothers and sisters to one another, and people got human rights. And we got to make sure that they're all actualized, that they are acknowledged, recognized, and received.
I want to add one brief note too about the question of what can the church do about this. We're all a part of the church, and we can all take action through our prayer, our learning, and our advocacy. And in terms of advocacy in particular, there was a sign-up sheet up front. If you didn't sign it on the way in, I encourage you on the way out, if you'd like to do so, please sign that. Also, there's a box at the very end that you can check. If you decide to check that, you'll belong to some email advocacy networks, the Catholic Climate Covenant, Virginia Catholic Conference. We'll send you action alerts on these and other critical issues. And you can actually, we have very easy ways for you to link up to your legislators. So you can contact your legislators directly when issues like this. So that's another key way that we as church can get involved in making a difference on these issues. The next question, do the DOD's plans preparing for higher water levels involve the city of Norfolk, or is it exclusive to the naval base?
At this point in time, there's a little bit of that, yes, but that's the whole point of what I was trying to say is this framework of cooperation and trust. It's changing. We are demonstrating in phase 2, our second year of our pilot, to showcase the specific area of Pretty Lake, which is part Norfolk, part Virginia Beach, and the Little Creek amphibious base, and how a coordinated plan of attack, if you will, to address that area, that specific area of those two cities and that base can be more effective through coordination. So that's one of our deliverables in the next 10 months of our 2-year experiment.
We're getting right to 8:30. We are going to take one more question. How much of local sea rise is due to sinking soil?
We're estimating a very small amount, but the key here is that we know the Gulf Stream is slowing, we know the Earth is warming. Those two, plus the increase in storms along the East Coast are all contributing to that rising sea. But the sinking land is happening, but it's on a much smaller scale. 1 millimeter, something like that. It's very small, but over the course of time, and it's all about the drawing out of groundwater, primarily.
Again, want to thank all of you and want to thank our panelists. I would now invite Bishop DiLorenzo to offer a closing prayer for the evening.
Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this evening's gathering. We thank you especially for our panelists who help enlighten us. We thank you also, too, for all the goodwill that is found in this group this evening. May we all hear what is said and try as best as we possibly can as good Christians to go out and try to make a difference in the world in this regard. We make all our prayers through Christ our Lord. Amen. Hey, safe driving home, folks.